Draco Malfoy, and the year when suddenly everyone paid attention to him. But Draco will hear about this. Chapter 6, Narwhals All Around. Draco spent the evening celebrating up in his common room with his teammates, so naturally he did not witness any of the drama that was simultaneously taking place up at the Gryffindor quarters. Only when he was stepping into the Great Hall the next morning to find Lavender Brown hanging Oliver Weasley, snogging the living daylights out of him, while Hermione was mysteriously absent, did he realize that something had gone very, very wrong indeed. He exchanged one meaningful look with Harry, who was sitting next to the pair of them with a pained expression on his face, before he grabbed a bunch of random sandwiches and walked right out into the entrance hall again. Thankfully, Harry got the hint and followed him only a minute later. "What in Merlin's name is this about?" Draco hissed, rounding in on him. "Why is Weasley snogging Brown? I thought he and Hermione were getting somewhere."
"Yeah, well," Harry said, shrugging helplessly. "I don't know. They had a fight last night. It was a bit my fault, I think. You know how fucked up Ron's self-confidence was before the match, so I pretended to slip him a few drops of Felix Felicis during breakfast. I only pretended, though," he added quickly when Draco raised his eyebrows. The problem was, Hermione saw I was properly scandalized that I would cheat at a match against you, and then afterwards she confronted me and threatened to tell you or McGonagall. So I revealed the truth and told them that, regardless of me, failing to catch the snitch. He did not meet Draco's eyes when he said it and pushed on quickly. Ron's brilliant performance was his own doing and not at all potion-induced. And then things went pear-shaped real quick because Ron turned on Hermione for thinking he couldn't perform well without the help of a potion in the first place. Draco closed his eyes and banged his head against the stone wall behind him.
"He's such a moron!" Draco moaned. "One day I'm actually going to kill him."
"Yeah, well," Harry sighed, shrugging again. "He's just really insecure a lot of times, I think. And Lavender is very upfront about liking him."
"Hermione made it clear that she liked him," Draco growled, feeling properly outraged for his friend. "Despite Weasley acting like a bag of dumb bombs the entire time, she still stuck around. She invited him to that stupid Christmas party. What more does he want?"
"Well," Harry bit his lip. "Lavender snogged him in front of the whole common room. So I think she, staked her claim a little more clearly than Hermione."
Draco growled and glared at him.
Harry had the decency to look abashed.
"Fine," Draco snapped. "Whatever, she's too good for him anyway. I hope Hermione finally sees that now and finds herself a nice bloke who's actually worth it." And with that, he pushed himself off the wall and walked past Harry towards the stairs.
"Where were you going?"
Harry called after him. "To find Hermione and comfort her," he called over her shoulder. "You go and be a third wheel to that piece of crap and his new dumbass girlfriend. I don't care." Harry was biting his lip and looking properly guilty as Draco turned his back on him, but he did not care. He knew deep down that he was letting his anger for Weasley out on Harry, but then again, Harry was sticking with Weasley, as he always did, so maybe he deserved it this time. And enough was enough. This time he had really hurt Hermione, and Draco was not going to forgive their so-called friend for treating her with so little care. Weasley always got away with everything. Well, not this time. Not if Draco had any say in it. He found Hermione quite predictably in the library. Her eyes were red-rimmed, though whether from lack of sleep or actual tears, Draco could not tell. She looked subdued and a little lost as she resolutely stared down at her book, and it tore at Draco's heart. Quietly, he took the seat next to her. She did not look up. "Hey," he whispered, staring at her profile. "Are you okay?" "Perfect," she said, her voice hard. Draco sighed, shaking his head. "It's me, Hermione," he whispered. "You don't need to lie to me." Finally, she looked up at him, and immediately her eyes filled with tears. Draco took it upon himself to take the book out of her hand and pack her bag. "Let's get out of here," he told her. Hermione just nodded and followed him. They found a quiet corner of the castle, and Hermione wasted no time to press her face into Draco's shoulder. Draco pulled her close and stroked her hair in comfort, feeling the way she trembled against him and hating Weasley with every fiber of his being. "He's not worth it," he whispered. "You're so much better than this, Hermione. You're smart and sweet, and he's just an arse who obviously doesn't even have taste." "Oh, please," Hermione scoffed, pulling away from him and furiously rubbing at her face. "We both know she's prettier than me." Don't think I haven't seen Ron gawking at her all year. Excuse me, Draco gaped. She's not prettier than you. Sure, she and Patel doll herself up all the time, but that doesn't make them pretty. No offense, but I don't think you're the best authority on pretty girls, she muttered miserably. Oh, so being gay makes me blind? He challenged. Good to know. Hermione rolled her eyes at him. You know what I mean, she said with a watery smile. I think if you can have an opinion on girls' beauty without being attracted to them, then so can I, he said matter-of-factly. And I'm telling you, Lavender Brown has nothing on you. And as it is, even if she were the prettiest girl in the school, which she is not, she has the charm of a mosquito. So really there is no way in hell she is more attractive than you. Hermione's smile was a little more sincere when she met his eyes above his shoulder. You're sweet, she murmured. When you say it like that, I almost believe you. You should, Draco said, bumping her back, because I mean it. Hermione sighed, her face falling again. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Draco decided not to say anything, but just sit with her in silent comfort for a while longer. As Christmas approached, their little group remained decidedly divided in two. Harry tried his best to spend time with both Draco and Hermione, as well as Weasley, though as the time passed, he was more often found with them than he was with a red-headed nuisance, Draco noted, with no little satisfaction. Well, he's mostly occupied snogging Lavender. Harry grimaced when Draco asked him about it. It's not like he'll miss me when he's trying to feel her up. Draco mimicked gagging, and Harry chuckled, shaking his head. Weasley was not the only one who seemed to have sniffed too much amortentia as the holidays drew closer. When the staff began to festively decorate the halls, Harry had to actively dodge mistletoes because girls had started to linger in their vicinity, hoping to catch him walking underneath one, or in some cases, even going as far as accidentally pushing him under one. It's becoming ridiculous, Harry vented at them one afternoon between classes, bent over their homework. I have to take carefully constructed mistletoe-free routes to class now, or else risk damnation. Draco tried very hard to keep a straight face. He did have compassion for Harry's situation. He really did. Not to mention that random girls kissing him really was something of a personal worry of his. But he couldn't help but find Harry's earnest outrage a little adorable. The boy could really be a little dramatic when he wanted to be. Hermione, on the other hand, rolled her eyes at Harry. She, unlike Draco, had no patience for Harry's antics these days. They both knew it had to do with Weasley snogging Brown all over the school, every day of every week. Honestly, Harry, it's your own fault, she snapped. If you just went ahead and asked someone to Slughorn's Christmas party, they'd stop thinking they stood a chance. At those words, Harry flushed a bright red and decidedly avoided Draco's eyes. Actually, Hermione continued, not halting at Harry's discomfort, I have had some girls in the bathroom plotting to slip you some of Fred and George's love potion, so you need to be very careful. Excuse me, Draco got it, incredulous. You need to have these girls' rooms inspected, Hermione. You're a bloody prefect. Use your powers for good. These girls aren't stupid, Draco. She rolled her eyes. They'd hide the potions well. Fred and George are sending them master's cough syrup, right? I'd have no idea how to find them unless I knew exactly what I was looking for. Draco glowered at her, but she ignored him to turn back to Harry. The point is, she pressed on, you can put a stop to it if you just ask someone. Actually, Harry said, and now his voice sounded strangely thin. He cleared his throat, and it looked like he had to force himself to meet Draco's eyes. Draco blinked. Actually, he repeated, still flashed a deep red. I was wondering if you wanted to come with me, Draco. Draco stared. And blinked. And stared some more. His lungs wouldn't draw any air. He was pretty sure his heart had stopped. As the silence between them drew on, some of the color seemed to drain from Harry's face, and he quickly added, as friends, of course. He smiled, though he looked uneasy, and Draco didn't know what was happening. Was he dreaming? Hallucinating? Had he finally gone round the bend? Only when Hermione kicked him underneath the table did he twitch, and it helped him shake himself out of his stupor. Draco gulped, and at last he nodded. Yeah, he said, his voice hoarse. I like that.
You would?
Harry asked, a little too fast, a little too hopeful. And now Draco's heart was definitely beating again, for it felt like it was going to beat out of his damn chest and hit Harry in his stupid, awful face. It's gonna be happening. This had to be some kind of farce. After all these years spent fighting, Harry couldn't actually be interested in him. Or could he? Yes! Draco breathed. He couldn't bring himself to say more, but apparently it was enough, because then Harry was smiling at him and Draco felt like he was going to die then and there. When he broke the eye contact, unable to look at Harry any longer for fear of spontaneous implosion, Hermione was grinning, her eyes fixed on her notebook. She was scribbling something onto the side margins and underlining it furiously. When Draco looked closer, it was one word, all capitals. Finally! The news that Harry was taking Draco to Slughorn's party spread like wildfire through the school, and though the entire female student body seemed to be disappointed that Harry was taken for the night, no one seemed to perceive Draco as a serious threat. Rather, he was seen as a fill-in, the friend who would generously act as a +1 to fend off unwanted admirers. It stung a little that Draco was not taken seriously as Harry's date, though officially it wasn't a date to begin with. Please! Hermione scoffed when he voiced those concerns out loud. He was totally asking you for a date in the first place. He just backtracked because you were too shocked to answer right away. He can slam the label friends as a safety net over it all he wants, but we all know it's a date, Draco. No, we don't, he argued quietly. You and I might suspect it, but that's it. You are so stupid, she called, exasperated. When will you start believing that Harry returned your feelings? When he confesses his love in front of the Great Hall? No, Draco rolled his eyes. Okay, I do hope that maybe that he does like me, at least a little, from the way that he asked. Good, Hermione deadpanned, because it would have been pretty damn stupid to deny that. But Draco sighed, fidgeting. I don't know. I never thought he'd actually show interest in me. I don't know how deep it goes. Maybe we'll go to this party and he'll decide that it's nothing after all. Maybe I'll scare him off by being too intense. Maybe... Draco! Hermione interrupted him, shaking her head. Stop trying to talk yourself out of this by imagining everything that could go wrong. This is what you wanted. Harry is what you wanted for 2 years. And now he wants you too. Enjoy it. Stop overthinking it. Yes, Draco sighed, nodding. You're right. Of course you are. Harry and Draco, for that matter, did not address the party again, but there was a slight shift in their dynamic Draco couldn't help but notice. It was there in the way their gazes met and held every now and then, neither of them breaking away until they absolutely had to. Or that one time in potions class when Draco had passed Harry his knife and their fingers had brushed, and Harry's hand had lingered, green eyes fixed on where they had touched as if in trance. Then Slughorn had strolled over to their table and he had pulled his hand back as if burned. They never talked about it, but there was something in the air between them, and it was driving Draco mad with confusion and longing, so that when the day of the party finally arrived, he was almost buzzing with all these conflicting emotions. The day didn't start off particularly well, either. Weasley and Hermione had a minor row throughout Transfiguration, which had Hermione so distraught that he'd had to spend the first half of lunch break talking his friend down before they could take their meal in the Great Hall. When they joined their friends at the Gryffindor table at last, the offending redhead was present as well, brown practically attached to his face, and Draco wanted to knock his plate of chicken over his head. Instead, he ignored him, rather turning his attention to the stilted conversation Harry appeared to be having with Patil. Patil, bless her, looked satisfyingly embarrassed at her friend's horrifying public display, but Harry still seemed less than pleased to be talking to her. He was strangely stone-faced, and his normally bright green eyes were icy. It would have been worrying if Ginny and Luna had not been sitting nearby, watching as if presented with the entertainment of the century. Well, at least that was Ginny's expression. Luna looked merely curious. Hello, Draco said tentatively, sitting down across from Harry with Hermione as a buffer between himself and Patil. Hi, Draco. Hi, Hermione, Patil said, both too eager and relieved, though this time her bright smile was not only directed at Draco, but at Hermione too. She was clearly trying to make up for laughing at her in Transfiguration when Weasley had said some derogatory things. It made Draco dislike her even more. He hated fakeness. Hermione, though, seemed to have no such reservations as she smiled back and engaged in small talk with her. Are you going to Slughorn's party tonight? No invite, she pouted. I'd love to go, though. It sounds like it's going to be really good. You're going, aren't you? Yes, I'm meeting Colmac at 8 and we're going to the party together.
These words had a tremendous effect on everyone at the table. Weasley, for one, stopped snogging Brown to stare at her. Brown seemed slightly flabbergasted at first, though she too seemed intrigued. Draco remembered how much of a gossip she was. Draco, though, had raised his eyebrows in surprise as well, and his eyes had flown across the table to meet Harry's in question. He blinked at him, clearly as shocked as he was.
Cormac? Patil asked eagerly. Cormac McLaggen, you mean? That's right, Hermione confirmed with relish. The one who almost became Gryffindor keeper.
Draco had to bite his lip to keep from grinning. It was well done. The taunting, the Joseph date, McLaggen might be a complete pellic, and Draco was pretty sure Hermione was going to regret it by the end of the night, but maybe, just for this, it would be worth it to her, just to rub it into Weasley's face. It didn't look like Harry agreed with him, though. He looked mildly appalled.
Are you going out with him, then? Patel asked, ringing the piece of gossip for all of its worth. Oh, yes. Didn't you know?
Hermione laughed, and Draco chanced to glance at Weasley, who looked positively livid. Good, Draco thought. Serves you right.
No! Parvati shook her head, looking as excited as a 5-year-old on Christmas Eve now. Wow, you like your Quidditch players, don't you? First Crown, then McLaggen. I like really good Quidditch players,
Hermione corrected, and Draco couldn't help but snort out a laugh, which he quickly tried to hide behind a cough. Underneath the table, Ginny kicked him, but she too was silently laughing, though whether the amusement was directed at him or at Hermione, it was not sure.
Well,
Hermione sighed, getting to her feet.
See you. Got to go and get ready for the party.
Draco looked at her, biting down on a grin. Damn, he had to congratulate her on this performance later. But his blossoming pride was interrupted when he felt Patil slide up the bench to sit next to him, shyly bumping his shoulder to get his attention.
I can understand what she sees in talented Quidditch players, though,
she told him coyly, and Draco's stomach turned a little.
Did I already tell you that you were amazing in the last match?
Draco said intelligently, casting a hopeless look towards Harry. The other boy's face had turned stony once more. Thank you. Did you know? Harry spoke up suddenly, his voice loud and cutting, and his eyes boring into Patil. The Draco is accompanying me to Slughorn's party tonight.
Oh, yes, I'd heard. She nodded, clearly not concerned by that fact. You're going as friends, right?
At that, Harry only glared, but much to Draco's disappointment, he did not protest. Ginny, though, coughed discreetly and muttered, "Proves that you know." Draco bit down on his lip. Hard. Harry, across from them, flushed and focused his attention on his unfinished food.
Patil, on the other hand, looked suddenly unsure. What was that?
She asked Ginny.
Nothing.
Ginny smiled a little too sweetly. Luna was scanning her face critically, and then she told her,
I think the expert got you, Parvati. It's messing with your brain. You should really let Madame Pomfrey have a look at you.
Patil looked affronted at that. Draco picked up his goblet of pumpkin juice to hide his smile. That night, Draco took a ridiculously long time to get ready. He kept scolding himself. It wasn't like Harry didn't know him inside out, and he wasn't one who was easily impressed by appearances either. But tonight was different. Tonight, Draco wanted to make an impression, so he kept pulling out shirt after shirt and holding them to his chest, checking them with his skin color and his hair and robes. Finally, he settled on a light gray shirt that brought out his eyes, as well as black trousers and dress robes. He fussed with his hair for a long while, and when the door opened to reveal Zabini, he froze for a moment, embarrassed at being caught. Zabini, though, just snorted, shaking his head. Well, he said, clearly amused. Hot date, Malfoy. It's nothing like that, Draco muttered, flushing. Yeah, right, Zabini chuckled. The whole school has only waited for years for you and Potter to get your crap together and ask each other out. It was inevitable, so don't give me that crap. Draco didn't know what to say to that, so he chose to stay silent. On his side of the dormitory, Zabini was sliding off his school robes and undoing his Slytherin tie, still looking at him thoughtfully. Don't brush your hair back like that. He frowned. You look better when you let it fall freely. Less like your father.
Oh, Draco said softly and freed some of his longer strands from where he had fixed them behind his ears. All right, thanks.
No problem.
Zabini shrugged, undoing the buttons of his shirt now. Who were you going with? Draco asked.
Pansy.
Zabini said casually. Oh, Draco blinked. I've always wondered, are you and her
seeing each other? Yes,
Zabini said simply.
Have been since 4th year.
4th year? Draco repeated, surprised. Wow, that's a long time.
What?
Zabini snorted.
Just because my mother has been married 8 times, I can't have a long-lasting relationship.
Draco flinched, shaking his head. No, he frowned. That wasn't what I meant. I'm the last person who'd assume people to be like their parents.
True.
Zabini sighed, shrugging out of his shirt and picking up a bright red one out of his trunk.
I guess you wouldn't.
They fell into a comfortable silence, Zabini getting ready and Draco fussing with his hair until he was satisfied. They left the dormitory together. In the common room, Zabini met up with Parkinson, who was wearing a tightly fitted short red dress under her dark robes, matching Zabini's shirt perfectly. It made him wonder if she coordinated it. It felt like something the Parkinson he used to know would do.
Hey, Draco!
Ryan called from the couch in front of the fireplace, and Draco turned to find him and Eureka sitting there with Zoe and Karina, all staring in his direction.
Huge grins on their faces. Don't you look dashing.
Shut up! Draco groaned, but he made his way over to talk to them anyway. Don't tease him, Eureka caked Ryan, who pouted exaggeratedly, but only grinned when she fixed him with a stern look. Rolling her eyes, she turned to Draco. You do look nice, honestly, she told him encouragingly.
It looks darn gorgeous, more like it,
Karina added meaningfully.
I'm sure he and Potter will make quite a sight tonight.
Yep, Zoe agreed. The girls will swoon!
Well, you should definitely have no problem bowling tonight, girls or boys for that matter.
Ryan grinned and Eureka kicked him again.
Ow!
He complained. Hanging out with Ginny Weasley is no good for you, she muttered.
I beg to differ,
Ryan called.
She's a charming young woman, and she's opening my horizons to a whole new world I have never even considered before.
Yeah, a whole new world of gossip.
Inter-house unity, Haneda.
Yeah, right, Draco muttered, clearing his throat. He would kill Jenny next time he saw her. It would be a slow and painful death, and it would not be traced back to him because he was a Slytherin. Thank you very much. I'll have to go now.
Okay,
Ryan grinned.
Say hi to the golden boy from us.
Like hell I will, he muttered and left them with a wave, feeling the heat in his face as he left the fire-warmed comfort of the common room for the cold corridors of the castle. He had agreed to meet Harry at 8 o'clock, and though he was a little early himself, Harry was already there when he arrived. Harry was dressed rather simply, his shirt white and his robes and trousers black, but Draco could tell that he had still made an effort, and as Draco approached, Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair in a hopeless last-minute struggle. He made Draco smile, and when he reached out to touch his friend's shoulder, Harry jumped, heat rising to his cheeks as he rolled around to face Draco. Hi, he greeted him breathlessly, eyes roaming over Draco. Draco did his best not to tense under the scrutiny. Hi, he smiled instead. I hope you didn't wait long? Not at all, Harry breathed, gulping slightly, eyes now slightly glazed over as he stared at Draco. He hoped this was a good sign. Okay, Draco said, taking an unsteady breath. Shall we go? Harry nodded, and it looked like he was shaking himself back to reality. He waved a clumsy hand towards the stairs, then they fell into step next to each other, making their way for Slughorn's office. It was only as they walked that Draco noticed how many people were lingering in the corridors tonight, and none of them were even pretending not to watch them. A large number of them were girls making cow eyes at Harry, and the realization made Draco tense up ever so slightly. Harry, though, did not seem to pick up on any of it, because when he opened his mouth next, he muttered very quietly, "You look nice." Draco forgot how to breathe. It took him a moment before he managed to find an answer, and even then his voice was shaky. "Thank you," he replied, feeling the flush taking over his face. "So do you." Harry did not respond, and then they arrived at Slughorn's office, and the noise prevented them from continuing any soft-voiced conversations anyway. Slughorn's office had been decorated elegantly, and there was music playing and people mingling, older warlocks as well as students. They had barely stepped into the room when Slughorn himself spotted and approached them, eyes naturally only for the boy who lived. Not that Draco had expected anything different. "Howdy, my boy," he called, his voice warm and delighted, and then they found themselves promptly introduced to one of the guests of honor, Eldred Warple, author of Blood Brothers, My Life Amongst the Vampires, and his vampire companion, Sanguini. Warble, on his part, seemed absolutely hard-eyed at making Harry's acquaintance, much to Harry's discomfort.
"I was saying to Professor Slughorn only the other day,"
he told Harry as soon as the professor had left them to their own devices.
"Where is the biography of Harry Potter for which we have all been waiting?"
Said Harry, throwing a helpless look at Draco. "Were you?"
"Just as modest as Horace described,"
Warple called in apparent delight.
"But seriously,"
And then he was all business persona.
"I would be delighted to write it myself. People are craving to know more about you. They were craving. And if you were prepared to grant me a few interviews, say, in 4 or 5 hour sessions..."
"I'm very sorry to interrupt," Draco cut in, putting a protective hand on Harry's elbow. "But I'm afraid that as Harry's manager, I have to inform you that the rights on his autobiography have already been signed off to another contractor." Warple's face fell, and for the first time he actually met Draco's eyes.
"Harry's manager,"
he repeated, a note of incredulity in his voice.
"Excuse me, aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son? You're not even of age."
"Neither is Harry," Draco shrugged, unconcerned. "Now, if you'd please refrain from bothering my client with business offers we can't engage in, we'd really appreciate that." Warple just stared at him, obviously speechless. "Oh, I've spotted a friend of ours over there," Draco lied, squeezing Harry's arm. "If you'd excuse us, Mr. Warple, it was a pleasure to meet you." And with that, they were off, disappearing into the crowd. It didn't take long before Harry burst into helpless laughter. "Oh, Barlin," Harry wheezed. "That was brilliant, Draco. My manager? Blimey." "Well, it did the job, didn't it?" Draco chuckled. "I wasn't going to sit by and let this leech talk your head off for the rest of the evening. I know his type. I've been to enough charity events of my father's to know how to get rid of them." "You are a marvel. You are." Harry grinned, eyes glistening in the fairy lights. "I'm so glad I came with you. I'm serious." Draco blushed unreasonably pleased. Harry just looked at him for a moment, but when he opened his mouth to say something, they were basically tackled by a harassed-looking Hermione, who squeezed in between them, looking over her shoulder. "Oh, thank goodness I found you!" she muttered absent-mindedly, brushing some errant curls from her face, making her look no less disheveled. "Hide me!" "What in Salazar's name?" Draco began, appalled, but Hermione gripped his arm and interrupted him, eyes urgent and wide. "I just left Colmac under the mistletoe," she hid in way of explanation. "Hide me!" Draco, being the loyal friend he was, grabbed both Harry and Hermione's arms and dragged them off towards a shadowy corner of the room where he hoped they'd be saved from any dubious admirers. "Thank you," Hermione sighed, sinking against the wall in relief. "You know, it serves you right for coming with him," Harry muttered petulantly. "I thought he'd annoy Ron most," Hermione shrugged. "I debated for a while about Zacharias Smith, but—" "Whoa!" Draco interrupted, raising his eyebrows. "I would have staged an intervention if you had asked him, just so you know." "Honestly?" Harry hissed. "Smith?" "Yes, and I'm starting to wish I'd chosen him, if you must know, because McClagan makes Grop look like a gentleman," Hermione deadpanned. "Well, next time he tries to touch you, hex him," Draco told her sternly. "Or do you need me to come over and hex him for you? I thought you were emancipated enough, but I wouldn't do it." "And they say chivalry is dead," Hermione snorted, but she cracked a smile at him. Harry, though, was looking at Hermione with narrowed eyes, and after a moment he asked, "Let's get something straight. Are you planning to tell Ron that you interfered at keeper tryouts?" Hermione blinked, looking almost hurt at the suggestion. "Do you really think I'd stoop that low?" she asked. "Hermione, if you can ask out McClagan—" "There's a difference," Hermione said indignantly. "I've got no plans to tell Ron anything about what might or might not have happened at keeper tryouts." "Cheers," Draco said, taking a glass of some fizzy drink that tasted faintly of lemon from a nearby table and taking a sip. "You're more noble than I am. If I had information like that about an ex of mine and he'd been such a jerk to me, I'd use it to destroy him." "No, you wouldn't," Harry frowned at him. "I'm a Slytherin," Draco argued, raising his eyebrows. "You just haven't experienced my pettiness yet." "I've experienced your loyalty, though," Harry countered. "If you had any affection left for that person, you wouldn't do anything to hurt them. They must have really screwed up for you to lash out like that." "Oh!" Draco said pointedly. "And you think Weasley hasn't?"
He stayed quiet for a moment, frowning at him. Then he shook his head. Draco sighed, taking another sip of his drink. You're more forgiving than I am, then. Draco shrugged. Oh no! Hermione moaned, suddenly interrupting their discussion and ducking out from behind them. He becomes... She was gone and across the room faster than they could comprehend what was happening, and when McLaggen reached their little corner, Draco had quite honestly lost sight of her. Senior Hermione, McLaggen addressed Harry, quite obviously ignoring Draco, and if anything, it seemed to endear him even less to Harry, because his voice and face were both stony when he answered, No, sorry. He shrugged before turning quite pointedly back to Draco and engaging him into a conversation about Quidditch. Draco was happy to indulge him, and soon they were all wrapped up in their little world, their discussion moving from Quidditch to school, to the people at the party, and everything that popped into their heads. They never stopped talking, and there was never a dull moment. Harry's attention was on him completely, and Draco felt heady with it. He was not used to not having to share Harry. Usually their moments alone were numbered and served a purpose. They rarely did this, just being with each other for the sake of it, without Hermione or Weasley or even Ginny or anyone butting in and demanding to be let into their talk. Draco wished it could always be like this, but he knew that it was unrealistic and selfish. After all, he, too, loved their other friends, and especially recently, he had become more open to sharing himself with people that were not Harry and Hermione. But this, being alone with Harry and being the sole focus of those marvelous green eyes, this was something else entirely, and it made him long for more. But the incredible thing was that Draco was actually starting to hope for more, because the way Harry was looking at him, smiling at him, occasionally leaning into his side or touching his arm, he was doing it deliberately. There was definite affection there, of romantic nature, and Draco knew he wasn't imagining this. He had been pining for Harry for years for Merlin's sake. He knew what obliviousness looked like on Harry, and that was not it. Draco was tempted to reach out for him right here and there in the middle of this goddamn crowd and kiss him the way he'd always fantasized. But he didn't, because this thing between them, whatever it was fresh and fragile, and Draco wasn't going to push, because he was no idiot. He was more invested in this than Harry was, and jumping his bones would probably scare him off. So, no, he was going to wait for Harry to figure out what to do with his feelings, and only then, when it was obvious that they were on the same page about this, would Draco try to move it along. He had waited this long to come this far. He could wait a little longer, and having Harry smile at him like this, knowing that there was a little more than friendship involved, was more than enough for now. When they eventually left the party, Draco's mind was buzzing with the knowledge of what was passing between them, and he couldn't stop smiling. It was a little ridiculous. Thanks again for coming with me tonight, Harry told him redundantly as they approached the entrance hall where they were to part ways for the night. I really had an amazing time. High praise considering the fact that it was Slughorn's party, Draco teased, but when Harry flushed, his smile gentled. I had a great time, too, he admitted. Thanks for inviting me. Harry gave a half-shrug in response and glanced at him, green eyes holding his grey ones. They didn't say anything for a long moment, just walking and then coming to a reluctant halt at the end of the staircase. All right, then, Draco muttered, still holding Harry's gaze. Good night. Good night. Harry nodded. He did not move, though. Draco hesitated, not sure what to do. He knew what he wanted to do, and Salazar knew the tension between them was thick enough to be interpreted in that direction, but he had just sworn himself to wait, and... There was loud laughter from down the corridor, and Draco jerked, taking a step forward without thinking about it. Harry blinking and looked a little bereft, frowning after Draco. Yeah, Draco said, laughing awkwardly. Good night. Sleep well. And with that, he forced himself to walk down the stairs to the dungeons, all the way bereaving himself. When he glanced over his shoulder halfway down, Harry was still standing where he had left him, staring after him.